Well, so I'm getting ready to start my new venture, and as I said in my last video, I'm going to document the whole thing so that if you're thinking about starting a business, you'll have some crucial steps that I never had as a young man and wish I would have. And I thought, well, hey, before I go ahead and get into any of those details, I think it's really important to start with the fundamentals. As in anything, if you don't have a good foundation, you are setting yourself up for failure. And you know, there's some critical steps that every successful person I know, and they're not secret. I mean, they're well documented at this point. Every business book you read, you can kind of boil it down to about 5 different things. And I just want to touch on those real quick. Number 1, first and foremost, mindset. And I know that sounds, oh yeah, well, and like I said, this isn't anything that it's groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but it's the most important thing. If you don't have the right mindset going into a new venture, you're already setting yourself up for failure. And that doesn't mean that you have to be positive all the time and be that really annoying person that's just like way too happy all the time. Those people creep me out a little bit, if I'm honest. But what I do mean is you need to know how to stay positive and calm when the storm of business that you're getting into flares up. Because that does happen early and it does happen often. Even right now, I'm starting out, so sold my business in January. My goal was to have been up and running by February, right? I did my 60-hour course. I didn't have a builder's license yet. You know, there's a lot of things that are out of my control. Here we are at the end of April. Haven't really got off the ground as far as I want to. I think I've done about $20,000 in business so far, and you know, not advertising or anything. But I had to wait for my builder's license. I had to wait for now Google, for example. Like, these things are out of your control. And what I mean by Google is, like, I can't advertise, I can't even market my business on Google until I'm verified. That just happened. And I understand why they do that, right? Because they want to make sure that whoever's representing the company putting this information in there isn't being fraudulent. But at the same time, if I don't have a market to go to, I can't sell my product, and that's my main market, Google, right? So it's not about, like I said, it's not necessarily always being, you know, super. I'm not always positive. We're human beings, and if you sit there and lie to yourself, like some of these people always, listen, that's not natural. Like, people don't live like that, but you do need to know how to overcome obstacles. You need to know how to improvise. You need to know how to adapt. You need to know how to overcome. If you don't have those key fundamentals with just what's between your ears, and that's one of the easiest things you can control, and it's one of the easiest things to not know how to control. You need to have your mindset right before you start, okay? And so that also tailors into, you also need to have your money right, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, business, and every successful business owner I know are probably some of the cheapest, most frugal people you'll ever meet, okay? Versus, in a great book that was, he narrowed the subject down, was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read that book many years ago. Robert Kiyosaki made some excellent points in there. It displayed like the dichotomy between someone who acted like they were rich because they had all the fancy things like a house and all these things, but then when he lost his job, he went bankrupt because he didn't really have any wealth. If you want to build wealth, you need to know how to manage your money. I don't mean, know how to take your money out of your paycheck and put it in. That's easy stuff. What I do mean is knowing where to spend and what to spend on. Don't go out and buy a flashy car and the biggest house, especially if you're just starting out in business and you got yourself into a debt hole, because that's going to add on to a bunch of stress that you don't need. So you need to be frugal, and not just for the fact that, you need to be frugal to become successful, but you also need to know how to be frugal because the market's going to shift, right? Last year, the economy kind of went from where it was, right? And if you're not able to adapt to that, and if you have your business set up so that, I've got this much money coming in, I know I can spend this much, and I need all this money for myself, you're going to fail. And that's not a good place to be. That's going to add to a lot of stress. So get your own, Jordan Peterson is another guy that said that best, like make your own bed first. Have your finances in order. If you're working a career and you don't feel like you've got, take the steps to get yourself on good, solid financial footing before you set out to get into business, because what you don't need is, hey, I gotta make $150,000 this year, or else I don't have, I'm going to lose my house and my boat and all these things. maybe don't have that lifestyle before you get into business. You're not going to become wealthy if you do that. You need to first and foremost have your own fiscal house in order. Which leads me to the next step, because now you might be thinking, okay, well, I've got my mind right. I've got a good sense of finances. I know what I'm doing. Great. What kind of business am I going to be in? Okay, that's a fair question. Probably one of the most important. You should. My biggest advice is do something you're already an expert at, or become that expert if that's the business that you want to get into. Okay. It's much easier to run a business and get into a business that you know absolutely just about everything about, and especially if it's like sales, because people don't buy from people that don't know what they're talking about. You have to know every in and out of everything that you're doing. For example, I spent a good majority of my career in the construction industry, mostly on the back end building stuff. Didn't really have the front end, the marketing, the sales. I was fortunate enough to find a nice big company that took a chance on me, put me in sales. I did very well there. I'm thankful for that, because that was basically, I call it like my master's in sales. I was able to make a great living, provide for my family, and I learned every single thing I could from that company while getting paid for it. And it's the decisions you make. Like, I could have just been lazy and done my job, but no, I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to be the best and get into the best position I could there, because I wanted to learn the ins and outs. I wanted to learn the sales, the operations, the marketing of things. And through those experiences, then I was able to launch my next business in 2020 in a much better place than I've ever launched any other business, because I'd already been through it. But I didn't have all the risk, because the corporation took the risk. I was just a sales guy learning from all of their mistakes, which, was very impactful. So become an expert, know what you're doing, and it could be just as simple as, the job that you're already doing right now. You're already the expert. Think about everything that you know. And if you're not, take the extra steps, become that expert. It's not that hard. You just have to make the effort. Which then also leads to my next point. So you need to focus on one thing and do it very well. Okay? It's very, very difficult. And the most successful people I know stick to one or two things, and they're very, very good at those one or two things. That provides not only the best service for the customers, but it also takes a lot of stress out of your day-to-day life. And if you can provide that just hyper focus, you are going to see success, because doesn't matter what comes at your way, you're just focused on doing one thing and doing it very well. You're going to be very successful at it, right? I know that from personal experience, what the failure feels like on the back end from that. Okay, so for example, I had a FedEx contracting business in 2010. Decided that, I think I was like 26 years old, 27, whatever I was at the time. Decided that, I wanted to open another business because I had a lot of ambition. I want to expand, right? Well, me and my buddy thought, well, we're into motorcycles. I like car stuff. Like, let's start a motorcycle shop. So we buy a building. Next thing you know, I'm looking at this space and I'm like, hey, we got like an extra 500 square feet and an extra door up front. Like, what can we do with this? Him and Hod, hey, let's open a sandwich shop. Oh, that could be easy. How hard is it? We'll just sell sandwiches at lunchtime. Stupid boy. So that was a mistake, and I'd rather you learn from that. Like, I had no business going into the restaurant industry. Now, could I make it work? Did we provide a good product and good service? Yeah. What was I lacking? Time. Okay, I vastly underestimated the amount of time, and that's the reason that I had to close the doors after 2 years there. That's the reason I think most restaurants fail. People see it as like, oh, it's just simple. And my hat's off to anybody that runs a restaurant, because anybody that's good at it knows how much actual work it takes. And I didn't have the time to devote to it to make it go. And that's why I ended up ultimately closing it, because I knew that I was just going to fail anyway. If I would have kept on the path that was already on a trajectory of failure, and there was no point in me, keeping something going if I wasn't really passionate about it, as well as didn't really have, it's just the small things that I wasn't ready for, as far as like your margins, your waste. The restaurant industry is very tight in margins, and if you don't understand how to control how much food's going out versus how much food's getting wasted, your profit margin just goes, and then you're breaking even, and then it's just no fun for anybody. So focus on that one thing that you're already very good at, and if you're not good at it, get really good at it at somebody else's cost. The next thing is one thing that I see a lot of folks like wanting to become wealthy and wanting to take those next steps because they have the ambition. What ends up happening, because we live in this world of, it's a blessing and a curse. I've learned a lot. I would say that I have a very, very good education on things, and I've never gone to school because I spend a lot of time reading, and I spend a lot of time watching constructive YouTube videos on how to learn how to do anything that I want to apply in this life. The problem with that is you can get into information overload very quickly. You have so much stuff coming at you that it's easy to get into that, and then that leads to analysis paralysis. So it's very easy to sit here and think, okay, well, I've got my mind right, I've got my money right, I'm an expert at this, should I do that? And then all kinds of questions start rolling in, and then that fear develops, right? Have you ever been to a restaurant that has a menu that's just huge, and you get that feeling of, I can't make a decision? I mean, the buffalo chicken wings look really good over here, but what about this rice pilaf dish? By the way, not completely related because they're on that same damn menu and they shouldn't be. It's like our Coney Islands around here. They have too much stuff, like from different parts of the world that shouldn't even be in there, and it makes you as our consumer like, I don't know what to pick. I might be missing out over here. You can get into that same sense of mindset when you're trying to launch a business, because you're trying to ferret out, in the beginning at least, all the ins and outs. And I'm going to tell you, you're not going to know what those ins and outs are. Even if you think you know everything and you're an expert and you've done it like personally, like the same thing, there are still things you are going to learn. You better be willing to learn and adjust from them. So, that's the thing though. You have to start to do it and not be afraid of failure, right? You're going to fail. I don't mean the whole thing. Like when I talk about failure, and that's the last thing I just want to talk about, because one of the things that I see, especially in our country anymore, is people they poo-poo failure. They think failure is just always a bad thing. The most successful people out there fail often and a lot, and they know how to fail, and they embrace that failure because they know through that failure they're going to learn what to do right. Right? So that's the adjustment. That goes to that mindset again. Don't be afraid to fail. Do not be afraid to fail. Embrace it. Expect it. Know that you're going to fail, and know that you need to learn how to adjust from that failure. Goes to your ego too. You got to shut that thing down, okay? Because if you're not listening and you're just like, well, I'm going to put my head down and run through this wall, and I'm not going to fail at it, and I know I'm right, and I'm not going to listen to anybody else, now you're really in for a recipe for disaster. So fail early, fail often, learn from those mistakes, right? Adjust. Once you adjust off that failure point, typically that's where you start to see that success line come in. So you fail, you adjust, success, you fail again, and hopefully you can keep that trajectory kind of going up, right? Those are the best people that do that are the ones that succeed in industry because they know that it's going to happen. And it's easy for us that have been through it in business multiple times. It's not as scary because we've been through it. But for somebody that's just starting out, maybe you're leaving a career, it's very stressful because you're in a career where the company's the one that deals with all that failure, and it really doesn't affect you that much, maybe other than like a bonus or something, or a good reprimanding from your boss. But when you get into your own business, guess what? You got no one to point the finger at but yourself. And if you start pointing fingers at other people, well, then that's the true failure, and you're not going to learn from it, and the business won't be a success. And, it is something you could keep up going for a while, but it's not going to be any fun for you. So, like I said, those are just 5 things I wanted to touch on real quick as far as what I know is a recipe for success versus a recipe for failure. I hope you stick with me. I'm going to show you where I'm at in the process. I am a couple months behind, like I said, but that's okay. And, I'm going to show you the steps that I take to launch this business, and, hopefully it's impactful for you, and you can learn something too.